as you're signing in, just throw into the chat what organization you're representing and roughly what your makeup is of revenue. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from foundations, corporations, individuals, or government? And it's just a warm-up conversation starter. So if you are just joining, I know I just let somebody in from the waiting room, just share with us what percentage of your funding you receive. And I'm going to advance. Now, I realize now I'm seeing that as I move my screen or my mouse that I'm flying all over the screen. I will try to stop that. But as a friendly point, please just call it out if at some point somebody says, hey, Lindsay, stop moving your mouse around so much. You just let me know. This is meant to be a friendly and helpful conversation. It's not going to be a very long presentation. We've got a handful of slides. We want to make sure that we share some tools, but then we're going to really get into dialogue. And Ife is not with us today because she's not feeling well. So we're going to jump in and introduce ourselves for ourselves. I am noticing that there might be a little bit of the screen cut off. Is that better, or did that not make any difference?
Looks great.
Better. Okay, great. Again, I am Lindsay Simonds, and I started this company about almost a decade ago, and I work closely with colleagues like Brandy Bertram, who's a senior consultant. Our team is comprised of professional fundraising consultants, and we work with organizations all across the globe on transformational change. So with change, our emphasis is on fundraising. So change through fundraising. How might we move the organization into a different stratosphere via more strategic, organized, and deliberate fundraising techniques? We've worked with teams that have raised a few $billions. So it's not something that we're just getting started in. We've had decades of work in this experience as a collective. And our emphasis is really on a white-gloved approach. So we work slowly and carefully with our clients on exactly what their needs are so that we might improve their fundraising machine and operation. Fundraising is ultimately a relationship-based engagement. So the emphasis that we give is on how to form deeper and better relationships with the people who want to give your organization fuel and support with their funds. It might be their money, it might be their time, it might be their cachet, their influence, but ultimately it's thinking about the larger community of supporters beyond the staff and volunteers into the funders. The presentation's goal of the day is really to understand why and how to begin diversifying your donor pool and receive practical operational fundraising tools and templates, increase your confidence and implementing diverse strategies, and then ultimately looking at next steps for how to approach this. So why might we want to diversify our funds? It's in the numbers. The data has been strong for decades now that says individuals are by far and away the largest percentage of the pie in contributing funds to nonprofit organizations. It is a core element of our operation as a society, especially as you think about taxes. That said, taxes is a driving force for contribution. It is not the number one or number 5 reason why an individual will give. So if you think, hey, let's do some big fundraising, especially around the end of the year, because that's when people are thinking about taxes, that's really missing the boat in thinking about the whole system here, and that people intrinsically want to help, they want to give, they want to have an impact. They may not have the ability to change their careers or interest in changing their careers to do the hard work of being in that nonprofit as you all are, but they have the will and drive to fuel it with their funding. If you contribute individual funders with bequests, So bequests are the end of life recommendations for giving. That totals 75% of giving. Now that has dropped slightly over the last few years, where you're seeing a slight increase in corporate giving and in foundation giving, but it is by far and away a person-to-person sport if we think about fundraising. Even in corporate and corporate and foundation giving, they're humans that we're having relationships with. Yes, they have different structures of decision making and criteria for strategic giving, but at the end of the day, fundraising is a human-to-human engagement. So let's understand the trade-offs. I saw a few of the responses in the chat, and the majority of the responses, as well as what we know from our work with IFE Kilimanjaro, is that there is significant funding from foundations, and there's quite an interest and openness to include individuals. Knowing that that's where so much of the funding in America comes from, how might we tap into individual donors? Well, there are pros and cons to individual donors, corporate, foundation, government. Some of the key nuggets to keep in mind are that with a foundation, they're typically very clear about who they will and will not fund and why. They're very clear about what would meet their expectations and what will not. They can be credibility boosters. So when you say, oh yeah, we get funding from boom, 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 then all of a sudden the conversation opens up. And that happens for other foundation giving as well as individual giving. Because folks say, okay, you've been vetted. It's that third-party endorsement. We see that play out a lot in fundraising. And ultimately, that foundations can often give support that is really in such a large amount that it can carry significant weight of major projects. However, it's often focused on that project. It's usually not for overhead. It's not for capital campaigns. It's not for consultants. It's really for specific needs. Now, of course, there are caveats to that, but in most cases, we find that foundations are pretty limited in what they will and won't give across the board based on what they have designated. And it is their duty to distribute the funds. So knowing that they will be giving, but they have the criteria to give. Corporations, on the other hand, now that also increases brand visibility, and it also can be a fantastic way for a win-win-win, where you're offering corporate sponsorships for events. You're putting the name on a volunteer engagement. You're maybe branding a t-shirt when there's a go clean up the river day, whatever it might be, that corporations can come with visibility, elevation, as well as helping hands. So I have worked with a number of organizations that have an optimal dynamic with corporations where they get funding from their marketing team, their corporate foundation team, as well as their employee engagement team. So they might get funding from the first two and then a lot of volunteer support from the second. And that's a wonderful element to corporate giving. Oftentimes, the drawback is obviously that it's tied to marketing goals. Not always, but it can be. It often is. And it can be temperamental. So when a new president comes in, there's a new director, a new directive from the board, they can shift. And I'm sure that many of you have experienced that very acutely in the last 6 months. We've seen that there's been a big change of tide in terms of what are our buzzwords that corporations are throwing money into. Oftentimes they require reporting and offerings being like a volunteer opportunity, but the reporting is in many cases, it's something that they have customized and they've built, but it doesn't necessarily have a likeness to what corporate foundational world expects. So that's something to navigate, and it can be a little bit tricky. Individuals, nope, I think somebody just got their background on, no problem. Individuals, so they can be very loyal or not, depending on how you're engaging them. But if you've been engaging them and stewarding the relationship appropriately, oftentimes the giving increases and it does not get abandoned. Only something like 25% of individuals actually have a strategic giving plan documented. And I think that's generous. And when I say that number, it includes donor advised funds that are or held by or designated by individuals or family foundations. So you'll see that with individuals, there's oftentimes loyalty and increased giving over time. They often give unrestricted gifts. This is where your fundraising person sits down with a prospective donor and says, what we really need is capacity. We have got to have more staff. We've got to have more wiggle room. We've got to have a consultant who can help us bridge the gap. We want to study this program or that. And they say, wonderful, how can I have an impact? Where is the place that I can have the most impact? Many times in online giving, you'll see that there are opportunities for the funder to designate where the money will go. Is it to this project or that project, or is it for the president's fund? As an example, more times than not, statistically, the president's fund or whatever equivalent there would be to the general unrestricted fund, that's the majority that gets ticked off in online giving. What that means is that individuals are saying, you know how to run the organization best, fund what needs to be funded. So that's where you get this great flexibility and nimbleness to really be strategic with the resources. Of course, once you have one funder involved, then and they have a great experience, they'll probably want to invite another couple of people involved to get involved. So hopefully it's a ripple effect that is much more of a social sticky power than per se going down a line of deep application and formality that you're going to get in the other three, really, government as well, of course. The drawback is that with individuals, it can take a long time to really get their trust and buy-in. We see that 6 to 18 months is the general time to really go from identifying or discovering a prospective client or client donor into a major donor, major gift. So that doesn't include annual funds. No, annual funds oftentimes can be within 30 seconds. They get an email, they're compelled, their friend sent it to them. They think, oh, yes, I wanted to give something to climate anyway. Thank you so much for the invitation. Done. The real hook is not getting that first gift, it's stewarding it so you can get the next gift. And ultimately, that you can start building a relationship. Some of our donors, they are just tried and true, consistent year over year, pretty steady, and sometimes low amounts. But over time, that stability becomes a great asset to the revenue team when you're thinking about where is our money going to come from? And you say, we've got this annual fund that's very steady. And perhaps we can elevate a couple of them and move them into a major gifts pipeline, but we'll never want to stop nurturing that base of consistent and steady donors. They're the ones who are sending the emails to their friends and family. They get involved in your end of year giving. They get involved in the volunteer drive, etc. Another con is that it does take time to nurture these relationships, and donors can be a little bit they can be precarious if they start feeling like, hey, you know what, you only come to me when you ask for money, and that doesn't feel good. Then they can say, forget it. It doesn't matter if you've met my requirements. It doesn't matter that I've given you to you in the past. If you're just kind of, what have you done for me lately, and showing up and knocking on my door for money, I'm not interested. And that takes time. It takes time to nurture the relationships so that the donors don't feel that way. Some of it can be done via segmenting and fantastic Salesforce integrations or whatever CRM you're using. It's true, AI is really changing the game, but at the end of the day, if you're relying on AI and segmented emails, you will not cultivate the kind of relationship where a donor is saying, I want to keep going more and more, to go from, I like this organization to I love this organization and I need to tell everybody who is philanthropic about it. And that's what you ultimately want. You want this to be that you have a handful of donors that are passion donors, where they're saying, this is my passion giving. There's no other organization that's better than this one. And it's because I love the people that work there and I love the impact of my giving. And this is a meaningful way for me to have an impact on the world. Government. The pros certainly are that you've got high dollar awards, and oftentimes they're long-term contracts that can be easily renewed. However, it can be hard to get in the door. They're often very complex, and there are very strict reporting requirements. With that, I'm going to move forward. we're focusing, as I gave a little preview earlier, for those who are joining the call on time, it was that we're going to focus on individual giving. So how do you prioritize when you're thinking about expanding your donor pool? And I'm zeroing in on individual giving, although all of these tools can be applied to the other categories. I'm going to start using language that's cueing individual giving. So obviously, you just got to know, why do we need more money? Is it just because we're on a roll and we want more money? No, that doesn't work. It's because there's something that's really exceptional that you want to drive forward. So you've got your strategic plan, short term and long term. And then you always have in the wings, but what if we got that $1 million gift? What if Mackenzie Scott knocked on our door and, well, she would never do that. What if one of her people called and had a 10-minute conversation? Next thing you knew, we had $1 million. What would we do with that? And how would we leverage that so that others would also see that, yes, significant giving is meaningful here because we know what to do with it. So it's defining what would be the impact, first and foremost, full stop. And it really is something that needs to be a thoughtful conversation had with board members, maybe key stakeholders of donors, staff obviously are involved. Then it's you're thinking through, okay, well, what are our benchmarks going to be? How do we think about the opportunity? What challenges might we face? This is sort of the planning, know before you go, plan your work your plan. Then you've got your table of gifts. So the highlight or the bolded four, there are four here that are bolded, right? 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're going to show these tools. So building your table of gifts, that's understanding how many gifts at what level might we need to reach what goal. Fourth is archetyping your ideal donor. So that's discovery of where should we spend our energy? You don't need everybody to love you. You need the right people too. So we'll look at that. 5 is developing your case for support. So that's kind of looking at above, what's our impact? What's our vision? What's our timeline? How can people get involved? Who is getting involved? Sixth is define and schedule your engagement moves management. Moves management is a term that refers to controlled relationship management of donors. So you're going from discovery to solicitation and stewardship sequentially. And we'll get into that. And then finally, engaging leadership and board and influencers as early as possible. That's just sort of a reminder that don't forget to do that. And we're not going to focus too much on it today. We're not going to go through tools to do that. There certainly are many, but just don't forget to start bringing in key stakeholders earlier rather than later, even in the hypothetical dreaming stage, because they're feeling connected to it will help to bring more support and approval when it comes time to present to the board. Hey, we want to do a really big thing in diversifying our funding, and what it's going to take is a mini campaign in most cases. All right, so as I said, there will be 4 key tools. This is one. So this is the table of gifts. I don't imagine that this is a very foreign visual to many people, so I won't belabor it too much, but what you can do, we're going to send this deck out, and you can just create this for yourself, knowing that a few keys are important here is that required prospects is usually a 3-to-1 ratio. Sometimes it's a 2-to-1 ratio. What I mean is that it's going to take you about 3 tries before you get to the one gift. And your top gift should be roughly 10 to 20% of your overall goal in many cases. Brandy, is my screen showing up all right? Okay, great.
Looks great.
And thank you. I just wanted to pause and make sure because I saw something change. So as you go down the pyramid, you're thinking about different groupings. You might segment your communications. You might have different strategies of engagement with your donor at 25,000 than you do at 2,500. In this bolded area of many, this is less than 2,500 in this scenario of trying to raise $100,000. This might be where your where your end of your giving comes in, where you say, you know what, I don't know how many it's going to take us to get here, but we think we can raise 10,000 from that. it's oftentimes that you would design this kind of table of gifts before you get started, right? So this is the sort of thing that you update over time. Maybe in 6 months, you say, okay, now we've worked down. We know who we're dealing with. Let's go back to that table of gifts and adjust it. Did we ever meet that $25,000 gift? Oh, actually, we got a $50,000 gift. Does that mean we can stretch the goal to be 150, or do we actually rejigger this and say we're going to stick with the $100,000 goal, but we're going to require fewer gifts at the 10 and 5,000 because that one mega donor really is an outlier, and we're still working on building the base at that $2,500 level. And so this is a tool that you want to print out, you want to save it on the drive, you want to look at it maybe once a quarter, probably more likely every half year. But don't forget about this, and definitely set it up before you start on any big fundraising engagement or campaign. Oh, your golden triangle. So this is sort of figuring out, who do we focus on? How do we prioritize which donors? And in this case, we look at the 3 A's. So it's the affinity for the organization. This is somebody who's got a connection. They've got that intrinsic drive or natural interest in your type of work. They probably have given to other organizations like yours. They may give in your region, but this is where it's sort of an easy yes for them. You just have to get to them. Maybe they don't even know you exist, but once you do, and they have that intrinsic interest, that's where we want to focus. We're not focusing on conversions here. That's a challenging kind of business. And in this conversation, and my advice to most nonprofits is that you're not trying to really convert somebody who's not philanthropic. Instead, you're trying to uncover who is philanthropic and how might I appeal to their interests. So in the ability category, this is saying, okay, I've figured out my table of gifts. Now, what are the sections that I need to focus on? What's the ability, the range that I need to focus on? And when you're using a top-down, inside-out approach, that means that you're starting with the largest gifts going down. So it's that 25, 10, 5, 2,500. And then you're going out. So this is starting with the people who already know you, who are already giving. So it's the board, it's your current donors, and you're going into introductions of meeting more people. The ability segmentation can be really helpful to say, where do we want to focus in this sprint? Maybe this sprint is 3 months, maybe it's 3 years. And so you're defining that. Then, of course, access. So this is really the linchpin. That's it. It can't be Mackenzie Scott and all the answers here, right? So if nobody has access to your donors, then don't prioritize them. So think about, who do we know? Who would answer a call? If somebody reached out, who would answer that call? And who is that somebody? So that somebody's got to be your staff, your program team, your board members, your committee members, and definitely think about your donors, because donors want to be helpful and they don't just want to give money. They want to give their influence. They want to give their resources and time. They want to be a partner. They want to be a teammate. So if you ever have an opportunity to invite somebody to help you or to give a favor, don't pull back from that. And there are certain phrases that you can use to couch it and sort of see, is this the right time to ask that kind of favor? But access is one of the most critical elements to major gifts that really is trickier than corporate and foundation giving. There's not an online application to talk to the neighbor. So that's the golden triangle. So in terms of the case for support, this is once you get in the door, once you've gotten in the door with the right person who has affinity for your organization's mission, and that they've got the ability to give in the section that you're looking for, maybe they've got that $10,000, $25,000 giving ability, then it's, so now what? What are we presenting them? It's not just your mission. It's not just the impact of your work. It's actually a specific tool that focuses on a specific endeavor that has a need or opportunity above and beyond the current operating tool, resources, operating funds, needs. There, couldn't find my word. The idea here is that you're really thinking about, why would somebody say, aha, this is something that I need to fund? more than anything else. I'm going to pay more attention. I want to study it better. And it's with for a little bit of formality, to be honest. Now, this case for support, it could be a PDF one pager, it could be a 10-page brochure. It could be a series of very specific speaking points or a PowerPoint deck. I've seen fundraisers walk into a meeting with an iPad and they slide through, okay, so here's what we're doing. This is what we have done. This is what we'd like to do. This is what it's going to take. And this is where you can play a role. Would you be interested in that? So this case for support should dial into ultimately a compelling call to action, but include the stories, include the stats, have some, inspirational detail, but it's really meant to be a business tool. It would capture the hearts of those who are strategic donors. And for those who are really heart-led, heart-first donors who don't necessarily need all of the business language of fundraising, you can navigate that conversation easily with them, learning about what motivates them. But it's always helpful to have a leave behind because in most cases with major gifts, there's more than one person who makes a decision. It might be a spouse, it might be a financial advisor, could even be a foundation or a board, a family board, if it's a family foundation. And finally, this is the last tool, and then I'll take a break and I'll open it up for some conversation, which Brandy will lead. But this resource here is the fundamentals of moves management. So this is ABCD backwards, ABCD. And the idea is that you never forget it, that you're first focusing on discovery. And so we focused on this today to say, who do we want to discover in the first place? How are we qualifying them? What are they able to give? Who has a connection to them? Do they already give in this sector? How are we prioritizing in the table of gifts who we're focusing on? So this is discovered. This is often could be well, yeah, we'll get into that, but it's more of like, you're doing wealth ratings, you're talking to your board members and peers and saying, have you ever worked with this prospective donor? What's your experience with them? You're cultivating their interest then, and we're going to spend even more time on that. And with cultivation, it means you're really just getting them to know you and you're getting to know them. You're asking high value questions and you're getting to know what might motivate them. The briefing is the formal meeting, and that's really where your case for support could come in, where you say, hey, I just want to have a check-in with you. I want to talk really specifically about what we're doing and why. And so you're reviewing the information in sort of a pre-ask style. And at the end, you have a call to action or a request, which is, may I present a proposal to you? May I talk to you about your giving? Who should be involved in that conversation? How would that be most successfully received? And where should we do it? And then they say, you don't need all that formality. Who has time for it? And you just say, okay, then you're ready to go. But they may say, I really appreciate you slowing this down. I do want to talk to a few family members. Let's set this up for a month from now and come to my office, whatever it may be. And then stewardship. So cultivation and stewardship are the bookends of success in major gifts, because as I said at the front end, it is such a relationship-oriented giving sector. So the stewardship means that you're really demonstrating the impact of their giving. Maybe it's a report, maybe it's phone calls, maybe it's photos, beneficiaries, and other volunteers might be celebrating a big donation as well. And it leaves them ready for the next opportunity because they've had the relationship stewarded so well. Now, I believe this is my perfect moment to pause. Yes. So Brandy, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to stop talking and we'd like to hear back from you. So go ahead, Brandy.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. You did great. Lot of content. Let's welcome Rick. Lot of content that Lindsay walked through, but this remarkable foundation of tools that can be used for any of those kinds of givings. We like to drill down. We like to drill down on individual giving. So you heard a lot of those examples, but let's just recap here. I'm giving you a little bit of time to warm yourself up. Finish whatever the last bite or sip is you have, because we're going to send this powerful membership network into breakout rooms together. And what we're going to want you to discuss first is which of these tools you are most excited to try and why. Okay, so we're going to cinch in there, and I want you to talk about that first. So your choices are going to be table of gifts, golden triangle to qualifier folks, building a really strong case for support, or applying that moves management structure for your donors or your funders. So table of gifts, golden triangle, case for support, or moves management. All right. I see here we've got about 20 people. I'm going to create 4 breakout rooms right now, and I'm going to create those, and I'm going to open all the rooms. I am going to give you 5 minutes to talk about this. Please use the magic of space and time travel, available only on Zoom, and go join your colleagues now. We'll keep an eye right here. We'll hold tight right here in case anybody needs some support. Come right back to the main room. Go right ahead. Michael. All right. I think that's most everybody back. Welcome. I hope you had some amazing discussion. I'm going to ask for some brave volunteers who could just share a bit about which tool and what support you think you're going to need to activate it. Yes, please. Michael, am I saying it right?
You're close. It's Mikkel.
Mikkel, thank you so much. Yes, please share.
So yeah, as a group, I don't remember the specifics of who said what, but I think like for myself, I was thinking about the triangle, the golden triangle, just as like a reinforcement of managing change properly, like doing it in a sustainable way that feels aligned with capacity and not just like throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. That doesn't feel like the right response in this moment. And I really appreciated hearing folks talking about the ways that they want to like sustainably change their income and their different forms of like revenue, both to like meet this moment, but like more long term. And I think that was like a really helpful thing of like we can't respond to crisis like being um frantic. Like we have to respond to it with like a really with real clarity, and just like having like one or two of these tools to reinforce what we do well and doing it better and more concerted in this time period feels really right. So just like some really good sharing from others about their current situation and how it matches up to the nature of the federal environment right now.
Mikhaila, I love that. And I love that you chose Golden Triangle because we have limited capacity to make remarkable impact. And we need to hone in on where we can move the fastest and best partnership. I love that one. Who else has some to share? Leslie, I saw your assistant was on the screen with you earlier.
My assistant is reminding me that it's dinner time, her dinner. But let me share quickly, because this is a new discussion for me. Elders Climate Action is grassroots, almost all just volunteer donations of members. We were in a group with several people from totally different types of organizations, so that the structure, oh yeah, we're basically supported by foundations, but we need to start looking at individual donors and another in a different way, so that in 5 minutes it was hard to have a discussion. I too sort of thought of the golden triangle as what Elders Climate Action area of focus could and should be, because it builds off our existing donors, but thinks about how better to reach out to members, how to use those who've donated, in the past in amounts that are worthy of following up on, and how we could use them to reach out to their friends, family, and others. So that was what I thought.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Leslie. Thank you. One more.
This is Winston. I did not identify when I spoke in the room, but the golden triangle would be it, because I think where we need to restart is with our past donors, and which are basically church program agencies and individual donors. And as I said there, we are in the process of hiring someone to do this right now. So this would be a resource for them also.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I love this. At the Theory Learning Action Conference, I hope I'm saying that correctly, where I will get to see some of you and hopefully many of your colleagues. I feel like we're going to have a golden triangle tattoo party. It's going to be magnificent. It's going to be really good. Winston, thanks so much for sharing. All right, we're going to move forward because I really want to make sure that there's time for individual questions today. And again, we'll keep this conversation going. But as we do, I want to hand it back to Lindsay, because as somebody who has helped generate so much impact, we fundraise to create the impact that we all go to work for every day. And as somebody who has done so much of that, I would like to kick this back to you, Lindsay, and say to you, hey, Lindsay, why do you love individual giving so much? Because y'all, we're unapologetically a little biased.
So true. Yeah, no, that's great. So the reason I love individual giving is because it's joyful, first and foremost. It's fun to work with other people about making change. So it's fun to be talking with donors about what change they want to see in the world and how our programs might impact their future or their sense of the world or the impact they're having for their family or their greater community based on their philanthropy. So it's personally joyful and meaningful to me. I'm highly relational and social. So on the, the archetype scales, that's a big motivator for me. But the other reason why I love it as a consultant and a professional is because I can see the most traction there. I can understand it the best. It's so much clearer. It's more malleable. You can really understand what's going on with this donor because I've had these strategic conversations, and if they've given me this feedback, I can think through that, and then I can pivot and make the next move. So we're going to start talking about moves management, but I really think that figuring out what's the next way to interact with this human being is part of the riddle. It's part of the fun of doing this work, as opposed to a foundation or a government grant or corporate where it might be, okay, we've submitted the strongest proposal that we could possibly do. All of our fingers and toes are crossed. And now we just wait for like 3 months and we just hope and pray that the money comes in and it's a make or break. It just doesn't feel as unknown. It feels like when you're working with individuals, you kind of, where you stand. You ask them good questions and they can tell you, you are so off base. This is not my interest. And you say, great, thank you. Here are some volunteer opportunities. Goodbye. Right. And if you just get that feedback, you just go back to that golden triangle and say there's just not that strong enough affinity there. So I'm going to let it go and I'm going to focus again on where is there the ability and where's the affinity and who has access to them. And if it's me, then I'll just focus my time better because it's so much more something I can understand rather than it's just a spray and pray with an application. So Brandy, how was that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. So let's focus in on increasing individual donors and their giving through this thoughtful engagement that I was just talking about. So I know there's a lot on this screen. I'm not going to read every bullet, and this is going to be shared out to you, so you don't have to read it either. But understand that this is another way of looking at the fourth tool that I already shared. So you're starting with discovery, cultivation, briefing, asking, and stewarding. You might see that this also aligns with their relationship. So they may have little to no interest or involvement during discovery. It may be that they're a brand new entity that you're trying to bring awareness to, take them from ignorance to awareness. Then you're engaging them, you're cultivating them, you're giving them ways that they can get to know the organization. Maybe they're being introduced to volunteers, other volunteers or peers. Maybe they've been sent great material. Maybe it's just nice emails and it's just a series of emails that you're sending out as you're trying to bring them into understanding the complexities of the work that you do, the challenges, the opportunities, and the impact. This is the area we're going to spend more time on in a few minutes. So cultivation is one that can be, that's the category I said it could take 6 to 18 months before you're ready for this pre-ask and then ask. These two usually happen, the briefing, the pre-ask, and then the ask. That ideally happens within a week, maybe a month, but not more than that. So Ideally, you're really in tight control at this point. It's kind of the Wild West in the discovery. Then you start honing in cultivation, briefing, ask, or tight, tight. And then your stewardship goes back to broad again. In the briefing stage, they really have a high interest and they've been getting good cultivation for some time now. They definitely have some involvement and you're asking them to ask. I said this earlier, so you might say, I want to talk to you about how you could have a greater impact on this organization. You've already had some impact because you've talked about us to your friends. You've introduced another person. You attended this event. You volunteered at that, cleanup, whatever it might be. But I want to talk to you about how you can have an even greater contribution to the organization or impact on the organization. And that's through direct support and funding. Would it be appropriate for me to prepare a proposal for you? This is the ask to ask. Would it be appropriate for me to talk to you about funding the organization with programs that are in great need? Would you be open to having this conversation? How does a week from now sound? How about a month from now? A month from now is not ideal. If they say, let me get back to you in about a month or two, I'm going on this trip vacation, I'm sorting out my finances, blah, blah, blah. Then you say, okay, but they're not as engaged as you might have thought, right? So if they push you off, then it's kind of a signal that says, yeah, they may surprise you with a phenomenal gift, but that may be something that you can say, oh, that's a grounder. That's another piece of information that my spidey sense can hold on to that says, you know what? They may not quite be like rearing to go and make the gift. Otherwise, it could be the other way where you're having this briefing and you're saying, here's the need, here's this case for support. You've had a chance to talk to other friends. Thanks, Kristen. You've had a chance to listen to some of our seminars. You've been to these events, blah, blah, blah. I want to ask you about your contributions and can we set up a meeting? And like I said earlier, they may say, we don't need that. Just tell me what you want. And you need to be ready for that. And so you're combining the briefing and the ask in the same meeting. That definitely happens and that's okay. But what's most important is that there's a recap and then a permission-based question and then the solicitation. So you're not kind of fumbling all over it. I swear it works. It works. So for people who are new to fundraising and they are new to figuring out how to do individual gifts, this is the secret to greasing the wheels so you don't feel like you're up over your skis. You're more like, okay, I'm pacing this out. This feels weird, but it's actually going okay. They know what's coming. I know what's coming. Now I need to focus on breathing. You put your feet on the ground, you breathe, you talk slower, then you say what you need to say, which is your solicitation, and then you zip it. Quiet your mouth, you let them respond. You handle that gift, that you handle the response, and there are a variety of responses, but it's most normally no, not now, not that much, or heck yes. You want the heck yes. Sometimes you get the middle too, is yes, but not that much, or yes, but not right now. That's when you then follow that tail and say, great, what amount is right, or when is the right time? What can we do to earn your trust and to earn your philanthropy, earn your investment? And that's another conversation, another training for another time, but I'll just leave you hanging there. Feel free to reach out if you want to hear more. We're happy to share that. And then ultimately it's the stewardship. So it's just reinforcing that relationship. I think it was Winston, who said you're going back to your past owners. This is where stewardship, you start that now, and then it starts turning into cultivation. And then you're ready for that briefing and that ask all over again. But the stewardship might have to do somewhat of like, hey, I haven't spoken to you in some time, or I know we haven't spoken to you in some time. Here's what's happened since then. And I apologize for a blip in the communication. This is what was going on. We want to get back on track. What have you been up to? What are your interests? How has your philanthropy changed? How has your interest in our organization evolved? And you're asking good high value questions to re-engage them and get them back on track. That's it. That is it. So I see some people are jumping off and I totally accept that we are right at the time. So I just want to pause here and say, what questions and comments do we have? That's it. We're not going to break out again. What questions and comments are coming up in the last 2-3 minutes, and then we'll wrap.